There is a moment in the life of every civilization when belief quietly gives way to arithmetic, not with spectacle, not with banners or flames, but with an absence of margin. The numbers stop accommodating hope, and once that threshold is crossed, nothing, not confidence, not rhetoric, not tradition, can negotiate with what follows. This moment has arrived before. It always arrives. The most enduring illusion of prosperous societies is the belief that continuity is normal. That stability is the natural state of things. It is not. Stability is an achievement, and an expensive one. It requires balance between obligation and capacity, promise and production, present comfort and future burden. When that balance breaks, the system does not collapse in outrage, it dissolves in silence. Debt is the quiet architect of that dissolution, not because debt is immoral, but because debt is precise. Debt is a claim on tomorrow, issued today. And when too many claims are made against a future that cannot deliver them, mathematics intervenes. Not as punishment, as resolution. At this moment, global debt exceeds 3 times the world's annual output. This is not conjecture, it is measurement. Public obligations, private leverage, corporate financing, unfunded promises, all layered upon one another until the distinction between solvency and survival becomes academic. The system continues, but only by feeding upon itself. This is the point where language begins to soften. Debt becomes manageable. Deficits become tools. Monetary expansion becomes support. Vocabulary adjusts to preserve confidence. But confidence does not pay interest. History offers no examples of civilizations that escaped this condition through belief alone. Not ancient ones, not medieval ones, not modern ones. The technology changes. The incentives do not. Consider Rome at the height of its power. Its roads spanned continents. Its armies secured trade. Its institutions appeared permanent. Yet beneath the marble and ceremony, obligations were compounding faster than surplus. Private debt strangled landowners. State debt burdened administration. Currency debasement masked insolvency. For decades, life appeared unchanged, until it was not. Or consider the monarchies of early modern Europe. Courts glittered. Culture flourished. Finance expanded. But borrowing funded appearance, not capacity. Wars were financed forward. Promises exceeded revenue. Eventually, creditors lost faith. And when faith disappears, authority follows. The pattern is ancient because it is structural. Debt accelerates growth, temporarily, then it arrests it permanently. To understand why, one must abandon the moral language surrounding debt and replace it with mechanical clarity. Debt is leverage. Leverage magnifies outcomes. When conditions are favorable, leverage rewards ambition. When conditions reverse, leverage enforces collapse. There is no neutrality. The first stage of every debt cycle is euphoric. Credit expands, liquidity flows, optimism becomes orthodoxy. Borrowing feels productive. The future feels generous. In this stage, societies confuse access to capital with creation of value. Consumption rises faster than output. Asset prices rise faster than wages. Debt disguises stagnation. The second stage is quieter. Debt reaches a threshold where growth slows. Returns diminish. More borrowing is required to generate the same effect. But because collapse has not yet occurred, confidence persists. Warnings are dismissed as pessimism. The third stage is critical. Debt ceases to finance progress and begins financing survival. New obligations are issued not to build, but to maintain. Interest consumes innovation. The system still functions, but it no longer heals. At this point, the outcome is mathematically determined. The only uncertainty is how resolution occurs. Never if. Across recorded history, excessive debt has been resolved in only 3 ways. Through inflation, which reduces obligations by destroying purchasing power. Through restructuring or default, which acknowledges impossibility. Or through catastrophe, war, collapse, or systemic rupture, which renders old promises irrelevant. These are not choices. They are consequences. The illusion of modernity is the belief that complexity protects against these outcomes. It does not. Complexity merely delays recognition. The underlying arithmetic remains unchanged. In every age, those who believed their moment was exempt paid the highest cost. Not because they were foolish, but because they mistook novelty for immunity. What makes the present moment distinctive is not debt itself, it is scale. Never before has leverage reached this magnitude across so many layers simultaneously: public, private, institutional, individual, all extended forward, all dependent on continuity. This is where discomfort begins, because once leverage becomes systemic, resolution becomes collective. Individual virtue cannot offset structural imbalance. Hard work cannot neutralize compounding. Yet this does not mean panic is warranted. Panic is a symptom of ignorance, not insight. History shows that while systems resolve, not everyone is destroyed by them. Collapse is selective, it is precise, and it favors structure over sentiment. Understanding this is the beginning of composure, not fear, not resignation. Composure. In the next part, we will trace the exact sequence by which debt transforms from instrument to inevitability, and how societies attempt to delay resolution through monetary manipulation, repression, and narrative control. Because collapse is rarely dramatic at first, it is administrative. And once you recognize the pattern, you cannot unsee it. But that recognition is not a curse. It is orientation. There comes a stage in every mature system when language begins to lose precision. Not suddenly, gradually. Words that once described reality start to protect it instead. Debt becomes sustainable. Inflation becomes transitory. Imbalance becomes temporary. This is not deception in the vulgar sense. It is preservation. By the time a system reaches this stage, it can no longer tolerate honesty. Not because truth is unknown, but because truth is destabilizing, and stability at this point has become the highest value. This is the third phase of the debt cycle. The phase in which debt is no longer an instrument of growth, but an instrument of delay. New obligations are issued not to expand capacity, but to prevent contraction. Borrowing ceases to be strategic, it becomes reflexive. History shows this phase is always accompanied by an extraordinary confidence in administration. Committees multiply, frameworks expand, models grow more elaborate. The appearance of control intensifies precisely as control weakens. In ancient Rome, this manifested as currency manipulation. Silver content was reduced incrementally. Each debasement was presented as minor, necessary Temporary, prices adjusted slowly at first. The public adapted, confidence endured. Until it didn't. In early modern Europe, it appeared as creative finance, new instruments, deferred payments, monopolies granted in exchange for loans. The system became cleverer, not stronger. In the modern age, this phase expresses itself through monetary expansion. Interest rates are lowered below natural levels. Liquidity is injected into markets. Asset prices rise. The illusion of recovery emerges, but recovery without deleveraging is cosmetic. This brings us to financial repression, a term rarely spoken aloud, yet widely practiced. Financial repression is the deliberate suppression of returns on savings in order to reduce the real value of debt. It is quiet, orderly, politically tolerable. Inflation exceeds interest rates. Purchasing power erodes. Debtors benefit. Savers subsidize the system without consent. This is not theft. It is arithmetic. Every heavily indebted system resorts to repression. There is no alternative that preserves continuity. Default is too visible. Austerity is too disruptive. Inflation, by contrast, diffuses responsibility. No one signs the order. Everyone shares the cost. The psychological effect of this phase is profound. People sense deterioration but struggle to identify its source. Life feels narrower. Effort feels less rewarded. Progress feels postponed. Yet the system insists that conditions are improving. The dissonance grows. This dissonance is the breeding ground of fracture. Not rebellion at first. Cynicism. Withdrawal. Loss of trust. Rome experienced it as depopulation of the middle class. Early modern states experienced it as tax revolts and capital flight. Modern societies experience it as polarization and institutional fatigue. Different expressions, identical pressure. At this stage, systems attempt narrative reinforcement. Optimism is encouraged. Consumption is stimulated. Confidence is framed as civic responsibility. Those who question sustainability are labeled alarmist. This is not suppression. It is social self-defense. Yet no amount of narrative can alter the underlying trajectory. When interest compounds faster than productivity, resolution becomes inevitable. The only remaining variable is form. This is where history becomes unforgiving. Because once debt reaches this phase, all paths involve loss. The only question is distribution. Who absorbs it? When? And how visibly? Inflation resolves debt by dissolving purchasing power. Default resolves it by breaking promises. War resolves it by destroying claims. Each method redistributes pain. None eliminate it. This is why mature systems resist resolution for as long as possible. Delay allows elites to reposition, institutions to adapt, structures to survive even as promises perish. This is not conspiracy. It is continuity logic. Systems seek to preserve themselves, not individuals. The consequence is that collapse, when it arrives, feels unfair. Not because it is unjust, but because it reveals asymmetry. Those closest to the system's core are shielded. Those at the periphery absorb shock. This pattern has never varied. At this point, it becomes clear why panic is the least intelligent response. Panic accelerates loss. It forces irreversible decisions at precisely the wrong moment. History is unkind to the reactive. What matters now is not prediction. Timing is unknowable. What matters is positioning. Understanding which roles, assets, and behaviors survive resolution, and which are sacrificed. Because while systems resolve, they do not erase everything. they reorganize. And reorganization always preserves certain functions. In the next part, we will identify those functions, not as speculation, as historical observation. The positions that endured depression, inflation, collapse, and reset. Not because they were favored, but because they were necessary. This is where clarity becomes practical, and philosophy becomes strategy. There is a misconception that collapse is indiscriminate, that when systems resolve, everything falls together. History shows the opposite. Resolution is selective. It does not destroy at random. It preserves function. When a system reaches the limits of debt, it does not ask what is fair. It asks what is necessary. What must continue, regardless of sentiment, ideology, or tradition? What can be allowed to fail? What cannot? This distinction governs every historical reset. The first category that endures is necessity, not desire, not aspiration. Necessity, food distribution, energy supply, transport, basic health care, administrative infrastructure. These functions do not disappear during collapse. They become more central. During the Great Depression, financial markets imploded. Paper wealth evaporated. Yet railways ran, utilities operated. Food reached cities. The system contracted, but it did not starve itself. Necessity was preserved. Speculation was not. In periods of high inflation, purchasing power dissolves. Savings suffer. Contracts lose meaning, yet energy flows. Land produces. Physical logistics persist. Inflation does not eliminate demand. It reallocates burden. This is why necessity-based positions are historically resilient. Not because they are protected, because they are unavoidable. A system can abandon luxury. It cannot abandon survival. The second category that endures is monetary detachment. Assets that do not rely on institutional promise. Assets that exist independently of confidence. Historically, this role has been fulfilled by hard assets, land, commodities, precious metals, productive property. Gold is often misunderstood. It is not valuable because it is admired. It is valuable because it is inert. It does not default. It does not dilute. It does not require belief in governance. In every monetary reset, gold preserved continuity, not growth. Continuity! This pattern has repeated across centuries. When currencies are diluted, hard assets absorb value. When contracts fail, tangible claims endure, not indefinitely, but longer than paper. The third category is systemic relevance. This is the least discussed and most decisive position. Systemic relevance is not popularity. It is integration. Being so embedded into the system's operation that your failure threatens the system itself. During financial crises, small institutions fail. Large ones are stabilized, not because of merit, because of consequence. A system cannot afford to lose its own spine. This is why centralization accelerates during collapse. Power does not disperse. It concentrates. Systems protect their core. Always. Individuals and institutions closest to that core experience a different reality during crisis. They are cushioned. They are informed earlier. They have optionality. Those at the margins absorb volatility. This is structural, not moral. Understanding this removes a dangerous illusion. That collapse levels hierarchies. It does not. It clarifies them. The final category is psychological, and it is the most overlooked. Emotional discipline, Most losses during systemic resolution are not forced. They are chosen under pressure. Panic converts temporary impairment into permanent damage. Fear accelerates bad timing. Certainty breeds leverage. Leverage destroys flexibility. History consistently favors restraint. Those who avoid irreversible decisions. Those who preserve liquidity. Those who do not confuse activity with intelligence. The paradox of collapse is that those who survive best often appear inactive. They are not. They are conserving option space. This is where the narrative of heroism collapses. Survival is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, deliberate, patient. The error many make is believing collapse demands speed. It does not. It demands precision. At this stage, it becomes clear that timing is irrelevant. No one rings a bell at the moment of resolution. What matters is whether one has already positioned oneself away from fragility. Fragility is not poverty. Fragility is dependency. Dependency on leverage. Dependency on constant liquidity. Dependency on uninterrupted trust. When trust fractures, dependency becomes liability. Those without dependency retain autonomy. This does not mean isolation. It means reduced exposure to single points of failure. Every system resolves, but not everyone is erased. Those aligned with necessity, tangibility, systemic relevance, and psychological discipline endure. Not heroically, functionally. This is not optimism, it is observation. There comes a moment after understanding when urgency fades, not because the situation has improved, but because panic has lost its authority. What remains is composure. Composure is often mistaken for indifference. It is not. It is the discipline of seeing clearly without surrendering to impulse. It is the quiet confidence of those who recognize patterns older than opinion. Civilizations do not end with noise. They end with exhaustion. The exhaustion of promises outrunning capacity, of obligations outgrowing surplus, of systems straining to maintain appearances long after substance has thinned. This exhaustion does not announce itself. It manifests as complexity, as administration, as increasingly elaborate mechanisms designed to preserve continuity. The more complex the machinery becomes, the closer the system is to resolution. History teaches this without exception. The late Roman Empire did not collapse in chaos. It managed decline. The structures remained, the titles persisted, but vitality retreated. This distinction matters because it explains why intelligent people often misjudge collapse. They expect spectacle. They receive paperwork. Understanding this recalibrates expectation. Resolution is not an event. It is a process, one that unfolds gradually, then suddenly. Those who fare best are not those who attempt to outpace the system, nor those who deny its condition. They are those who move in parallel with it, reducing fragility, preserving optionality, maintaining dignity. Dignity is rarely discussed in economic terms, yet it is central. Dignity is the refusal to be psychologically leveraged, the refusal to trade long-term autonomy for short-term reassurance. This is why emotional discipline matters more than information. Information without discipline produces anxiety. Discipline without information produces rigidity. The balance of both produces judgment. Judgment, historically, is what separates endurance from erasure. There is a temptation, particularly in advanced societies, to believe that intelligence alone offers protection. It does not. Intelligence without humility creates fragility. Humility permits adaptation. Adaptation is not retreat. It is alignment. Aligning expectations with capacity. Aligning commitments with reality. Aligning personal structure with systemic trajectory. This alignment produces calm. Not optimism, not pessimism. Calm. Calm allows one to observe without distortion, to act without haste, to refrain when others rush. History favors those who preserve the ability to choose. Choice disappears under leverage. Choice disappears under panic. Choice disappears under certainty. The irony is that freedom is often lost in pursuit of comfort. Debt offers comfort today in exchange for control tomorrow. Systems do the same. Recognizing this does not require rejection of society. It requires discernment. Knowing where participation strengthens resilience and where it creates dependency. This is the silent advantage of understanding. It does not announce itself. It does not seek validation. It simply alters behavior. If this work has resonated, it is not because it offered answers, but because it clarified questions worth holding. Knowledge of this kind was never meant to be consumed passively. It is meant to be reflected upon, discussed carefully, shared selectively. If you believe that thoughtful analysis still has a place, beyond outrage, beyond slogans, you may choose to remain here. Not as a follower, as a participant. You may subscribe, not out of habit, but alignment. You may support this work with a quiet signal of appreciation. You may share it with one person of discernment, someone capable of conversation rather than reaction. And if you leave a comment, let it be measured, a reflection, a question, an observation drawn from your own reasoning. Those contributions matter. They shape the tone of discourse. Systems resolve. Individuals endure. Understanding is not immunity, but it is orientation. And orientation is the beginning of agency. Thank you for the seriousness of your attention.